The dust cloud rising from the valley below told Emma Brennan everything she needed to know. Trouble was coming, and it wore expensive boots. She stood on the porch of her small cabin, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, her green eyes narrowing as she counted the riders. 5 men on horseback, moving with the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. At 23 years old, Emma had spent the last 2 years carving out a life on this 160 acres of Montana Territory land, and she would be damned if anyone took it from her now. It was 1884, and the Homestead Act had given her a chance most women never got, a chance to own something that was truly hers. The lead rider wore a black suit that seemed absurdly formal for the rugged landscape, and even from a distance, Emma could see the gleam of his silver belt buckle catching the afternoon sun. She recognized him immediately. Cornelius Blackwood, the land baron who owned nearly everything worth owning in the valley below. He had made his fortune in cattle and railroads, and rumor had it he wanted to expand his empire up into the mountain territory where her homestead sat. Emma stepped off the porch, her worn boots kicking up small puffs of dirt. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her calico dress had been mended more times than she could count, but she held her head high. Her father had taught her that much before he died: never let them see you afraid. The riders pulled up about 20 feet from her cabin, their horses snorting and stamping. Blackwood dismounted with practiced ease, Didi adjusting his hat as he gave her a smile that probably worked on the women in town but sent a chill down Emma's spine. "Miss Brennan," he said, his voice smooth as honey and twice as sweet. "A pleasure to see you on this fine afternoon." "Mr. Blackwood?" Emma replied, keeping her tone neutral. "What brings you up here?" He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, and Emma's heart sank. "I'm afraid there has been a terrible mistake, Miss Brennan. It seems your claim was never properly filed with the land office. According to the records, this land is still available for purchase, and I have taken the liberty of securing it for myself." The world seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. "That is impossible. I filed those papers myself 2 years ago. I have been living here, working this land. I'm meeting all the requirements." Blackwood's smile never wavered. "I understand your confusion, my dear, but the law is quite clear. Without proper documentation, you have no legal claim. However, I am not an unreasonable man. I am willing to offer you employment at my ranch. You could work in the main house, earn decent wages." Emma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She knew exactly what he was suggesting, and it made her blood boil. "This land is mine. I proved up on it. I built this cabin with my own 2 hands." "The cabin will make a fine line shack for my men," Blackwood said, his tone turning cold. "I will give you until tomorrow morning to vacate the premises. After that, my men will remove you by force if necessary." One of the riders behind him snickered, and Emma felt rage and desperation warring in her chest. Only she had nowhere to go, no family left, and winter was coming in a few months. This homestead was everything she had worked for, everything her father had dreamed of before the fever took him. "I will fight you," she said quietly. "I will go to the land office myself. I will prove you are wrong." Blackwood mounted his horse again, looking down at her with something like pity in his cold blue eyes. "You do that, Miss Brennan. But I think you will find that the law tends to favor men of means and influence. Good day to you." They rode away, leaving Emma standing alone in the fading afternoon light, her whole world crumbling around her. She stood there for a long moment, fighting back tears of frustration and fear, before she finally turned and went back into her cabin. The small space felt different now, tainted by the threat of loss. She sank down onto her narrow bed and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and began to plan. She would need to get to the land office in Helena, a journey of nearly 40 miles through rough territory. She would need to do it quickly, before Blackwood could manipulate the records further. Emma owned a mule named Jasper, sturdy but slow. The journey would take her at least 2 days, maybe more, but she had no choice. Emma spent the evening gathering supplies for the trip: dried meat, hardtack, a canteen of water, and the precious tin box where she kept her important papers. She pulled out the receipt from the land office, yellowed but still readable, proof that she had paid her filing fee and submitted her claim. Surely this would be enough to prove Blackwood was lying. She barely slept that night, jumping at every sound, half expecting Blackwood's men to return under cover of darkness. But dawn broke clear and cold, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, and Emma was already saddling Jasper when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the opposite direction Blackwood had come from. Emma's hand went to the rifle she kept near the door, but she did not pick it up yet. This was a single rider, not a group, and something made her wait to see who it was. The horse and rider emerged from the tree line, and Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. The man was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy wool shirt that stretched tight across his chest and arms, revealing muscles built from a life of hard labor in the mountains. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention. Deep brown, intelligent, and kind despite the hard edge of someone who had seen his share of trouble. He rode with the easy confidence of a man completely at home in the wilderness, and as he drew closer, Emma could see the knife at his belt and the rifle secured to his saddle. This was a mountain man, one of the trappers and hunters who lived in the high country, men who were more legend than reality to most settlers. He stopped a respectful distance away and raised one large hand in greeting. "Morning, miss," he called out, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in Emma's chest. Name is Caleb Stone. I'm camped up in the high country, and I could not help but notice you had some visitors yesterday who seemed to be causing you distress." Emma's suspicion warred with relief. She needed help, but she had learned to be careful about trusting strangers. "You were watching?" "I was hunting elk on the ridge," Caleb explained, gesturing toward the mountains behind her cabin. "Saw the whole thing through my glass. That was Cornelius Blackwood, was it not?" "It was." Emma relaxed slightly but kept her distance. "He claims my homestead is not legally filed and wants me off the land." Caleb's expression darkened. "Blackwood is a snake. Pardon my language, miss, but it is the truth. He's been running smaller landholders out of the valley for years, using every dirty trick he can think of. I have watched him do it." "Why would you care?" Emma asked bluntly. "Why come down here to talk to me?" Caleb dismounted, and Emma was struck again by his sheer size. He had to be at least 230 pounds of solid muscle, built like a bear. But his movements were careful, almost gentle, as if he was aware of how intimidating he must appear. "I came down here because what Blackwood is doing is wrong," Caleb said simply, "and because I might be able to help you. I know someone at the land office in Helena, a clerk named Thomas Murphy. He is honest, which is a rare thing. If your papers are legitimate, he will help you prove it. But you will need to get there fast before Blackwood can bribe the right people." "I was planning to leave this morning," Emma said, gesturing to Jasper, "but it will take me 2 days to get there on my mule." Caleb looked at Jasper, then back at Emma, and something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "That animal is a good worker, but he is not built for speed. My horse could get us there by nightfall if we leave now and push hard." "Us?" Emma echoed. "I'm offering to escort you," Caleb said. "The trail to Helena is not safe for a woman traveling alone, and Blackwood might have men watching the roads. You need someone who knows the back trails through the mountains." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it herself, but practicality won out over pride. He was right. She would be vulnerable on the road, and time was running out. "Why would you do this for me? You do not even know me." Caleb was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I have been living in these mountains for 8 years, Miss Brennan. I left civilization behind because I got tired of watching powerful men crush everyone in their path. I thought if I removed myself from it all, I would not have to see that kind of injustice anymore. But I can see it happening to you, and I realize that hiding in the mountains does not make me any less responsible for standing up when I can." He met her eyes steadily. "Besides, I know what it is like to lose everything. I would not wish that on anyone." There was a pain in his words that Emma recognized, the kind that came from deep loss. She made her decision in that moment, trusting her instincts about this stranger who had appeared when she needed help most. "All right," she said. Give me 10 minutes to secure the cabin." Caleb nodded and turned to check his horse's cinch, giving her privacy to gather her things. Emma moved quickly, banking the fire, securing the shutters, and grabbing her tin box of papers. She changed into her sturdiest riding skirt and boots, threw a shawl around her shoulders, and tucked her hair more securely into its braid. When she emerged from the cabin, Caleb was waiting with his horse, a magnificent bay gelding that stood at least 16 hands high. The animal was clearly built for endurance, with powerful hindquarters and a deep chest. "His name is Thunder," Caleb said, stroking the horse's neck. "He will carry us both without complaint, but you will need to ride close. Do you have experience riding double?" "Some," Emma admitted, on feeling her cheeks warm at the thought of sitting so close to this stranger. But there was no help for it. Caleb mounted first, then reached down to pull Emma up behind him with an ease that spoke to his strength. She settled onto Thunder's broad back, acutely aware of the solid warmth of Caleb's body in front of her. She had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist, her fingers barely meeting over the expanse of his chest. "Hold tight," Caleb said, and then they were moving, Thunder's powerful stride eating up the distance as they headed not toward the main road, but up into the mountains. The ride was unlike anything Emma had experienced. Caleb guided Thunder through trails that Emma would never have found on her own, winding paths that climbed high into the pine forests and then descended into hidden valleys. And they traveled at a pace that was just short of reckless, but Caleb's confidence never wavered, and Thunder seemed to know every rock and route by heart. They did not talk much at first, both focused on the journey, but as the morning wore into afternoon, Emma found herself relaxing slightly. Caleb's presence was reassuring in a way she had not expected. He radiated competence and strength, but there was nothing threatening about him. If anything, she felt safer than she had in months. "How long have you been on your homestead?" Caleb asked as they paused to water Thunder at a mountain stream. 2 years, Emma said, stretching her stiff legs. "My father and I came out here from Ohio after my mother died. He had dreams of building something, of owning land, but he caught fever the first winter, and I finished the homestead alone." Caleb's expression softened with sympathy. "That must have been hard." "It was," Emma admitted, "but giving up would have meant his death was for nothing, so I kept going. I learned to build, to hunt, to survive, and I was proud of what I created." Her voice cracked slightly. "I cannot lose it now. It is all I have left of him." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then said, "You will not lose it. I promise you that." The certainty in his voice made Emma want to believe him. "You cannot promise that. You do not know what Blackwood has done with the records." "Then we will find a way to prove your claim another way," Caleb said firmly. "But I will not let him steal your land, Emma, not without a fight." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about hearing it in his deep voice made her heart skip. She looked at him more closely, taking in the strong line of his jaw beneath the beard, the weathered quality of his skin that spoke to years spent outdoors, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as if he smiled more than his serious demeanor suggested. "Why did you come to the mountains?" she asked impulsively. "You said you lost everything. What happened?" Caleb's expression shuddered, but after a moment he answered, "I had a ranch in Wyoming territory near Laramie. It was not much, but it was mine. I was engaged to be married, had my whole life planned out. Then a man named Richard Cross decided he wanted my water rights. When I refused to sell, he burned my ranch, killed my livestock, and framed me for rustling his cattle." Emma gasped. That is terrible." "I was arrested, spent 6 months in jail before the truth came out. By the time I was cleared, my fiancé had married Cross, my ranch was sold for unpaid debts, and I had nothing left." Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless, but Emma could hear the pain beneath it. "So I came to the mountains. I figured if I had nothing, at least I could have freedom." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "That is not fair." "Life rarely is," Caleb said, "but it taught me something important. When you have been at the bottom, you learn to value what matters, not land or wealth or status, but integrity, honor, the kind of strength that cannot be taken from you." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You have that strength, Emma. I saw it in the way you stood up to Blackwood. That is worth more than any piece of land." They remounted and continued their journey, the conversation having created a new intimacy between them. Emma found herself noticing small things about Caleb, The way he always scanned the horizon, alert for danger, the gentleness with which he handled thunder, the occasional moments when he would point out an eagle soaring overhead, or a deer moving through the trees, sharing the beauty of the wilderness with her. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Helena finally came into view in the valley below. The territorial capital was a sprawling collection of buildings centered around Last Chance Gulch, where gold had been discovered 20 years earlier. Even from a distance, Emma could hear the sounds of civilization, hammers ringing, voices calling, the rumble of wagons on the streets. They rode into town just as the lamplighters were beginning their evening rounds. Helena was bustling, despite the late hour, miners and merchants and cowboys all mixing in the muddy streets. Caleb guided Thunder through the chaos with practiced ease, heading for a stable on the edge of town. "The land office will be closed by now," he said as he helped Emma dismount. Her legs nearly buckled after so many hours in the saddle, and Caleb's strong hands steadied her, his touch lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. "We will need to find a place to stay tonight and go first thing in the morning." Emma's stomach sank as she realized the implication. She'd been so focused on getting to Helena that she had not thought about the practicalities. "I do not have money for a hotel." "I do," Caleb said simply. "I sell furs and hunt for meat that I trade in town. It is not much, but it is enough for 2 rooms at a decent boarding house." Emma wanted to argue, hated the idea of being indebted to anyone, but practicality won out again. "I will pay you back. Once this is settled, I will find a way." Caleb looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "I know you will." He arranged for Thunder to be stabled and fed, then led Emma to a respectable boarding house run by a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson. The woman looked between Caleb and Emma with obvious suspicion, until Caleb politely requested 2 separate rooms and paid in advance. Meals are served at 6 and 7, Mrs. Henderson said, her tone softening slightly as she handed them each a key. "Hot water for washing is available in the kitchen." Emma's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the street. She sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted, and allowed herself a moment of doubt. What if they got to the land office and her papers were truly missing? What if Blackwood had already corrupted the records beyond repair? A soft knock at her door interrupted her spiral of worry. She opened it to find Caleb standing in the hallway, looking uncertain for the first time since she had met him. "I thought you might want to get something to eat," he said. "There is a restaurant down the street that serves decent food. My treat." Emma knew she should refuse. She should maintain some distance from this man who had already done so much for her, but she found herself nodding. That would be nice. Thank you." They walked through the evening streets of Helena, and Emma was aware of the looks they attracted. Caleb was hard to miss, his size and mountain man appearance marking him as someone outside the normal run of townfolk. But he seemed oblivious to the stares, his attention focused on Emma, making sure she did not stumble on the uneven boardwalk, holding doors open for her with an old-fashioned courtesy that made her heart flutter. The restaurant was warm and filled with the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread. They settled at a corner table, and for the first time, Emma had a chance to really look at Caleb in proper light. He had washed at the boarding house, and his dark hair was damp, or curling slightly at the ends. Without the dust of the trail on him, she could see that he was younger than she had first thought, probably no more than 28 or 29. And beneath the beard and weather-worn features, he was handsome in a rugged elemental way that made something warm unfurl in Emma's chest. They ordered beef stew and bread, and as they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. Caleb told her about life in the high country, about tracking elk and wolves, about the brutal beauty of winter when the snow was 10 feet deep and the silence was absolute. Emma found herself sharing things she had not told anyone, her loneliness on the homestead, her fears about the coming winter, her dreams of building something larger, maybe even running cattle like her father had wanted. "Well, you really love that land," Caleb observed, and it was not a question. "I do," Emma admitted. "It is more than just property to me. It is proof that I can survive on my own, that I am capable of building a life. Does that make sense?" "More than you know," Caleb said. His dark eyes were intense as they met hers. You remind me of how I used to be before everything went wrong. You have this fire in you, this determination. It is admirable." Emma felt her cheeks heat under his gaze. "I'm not sure about admirable. Stubborn, maybe." "Nothing wrong with stubborn when it's in the service of something worth fighting for." Caleb reached across the table, and for a moment Emma thought he might take her hand, but he seemed to think better of it and pulled back. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Emma, I want you to know that you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You did not fall apart when Blackwood threatened you. You did not give up. You fought back. That takes real courage." Emma did not know what to say to that. She had never thought of herself as particularly courageous, just determined to survive. But the way Caleb looked at her made her feel like maybe she was stronger than she believed. They lingered over coffee, neither seeming to want the evening to end, but eventually the restaurant owner began pointedly stacking chairs. They walked back to the boarding house through streets that had grown quieter, the respectable citizens having retired for the night, while the saloons and gambling halls were just getting started. At the door to her room, Emma turned to face Caleb, but he stood so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his large frame, could smell the scent of pine and leather that clung to him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for helping me, for believing in me. I do not know what I would have done if you had not appeared this morning." Caleb's expression was soft in the dim hallway light. "I'm glad I could help. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging, but we will face it together." The word "together" sent a small thrill through Emma. She realized with some surprise that she liked the idea of facing things with Caleb, liked not being alone for the first time in 2 years. On impulse, she reached out and touched his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. "Good night, Caleb." "Good night, Emma," he said, his voice rough. He stood in the hallway until she closed and locked her door, and even then, she could hear him waiting for a long moment before his own door opened and closed. Emma changed into her nightgown and lay in the unfamiliar bed, her mind racing. In less than 24 hours, Caleb Stone had become important to her in a way she could not fully explain. He made her feel safe and challenged and seen all at once, and the way he looked at her, as if she was something precious and worth protecting, made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. She fell asleep thinking about his dark eyes and the gentleness of his hands, and for the first time since Blackwood's visit, she felt a flicker of hope. Morning came too early, pale light filtering through the thin curtains. Emma dressed quickly in her best dress. It was a dark blue calico that she'd been saving, and braided her hair into a neat coil at the nape of her neck. When she emerged from her room, Caleb was already waiting, dressed in what were clearly his town clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that did nothing to hide his powerful build. He had trimmed his beard slightly and tied his hair back, looking more civilized but no less imposing. "You look nice," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Emma's stomach flip. "So do you," she managed, and was rewarded with a small smile that transformed his usually serious face. They ate a quick breakfast at the boarding house, neither having much appetite, and then set out for the land office. The building was a modest wood-frame structure on a side street, and were distinguished mainly by the territorial seal painted on the sign above the door. A clerk was just unlocking the entrance as they arrived, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. "Good morning," Caleb said, his voice polite but firm. "We need to speak with Thomas Murphy. Is he here yet?" The clerk looked them over with barely concealed curiosity. "Mr. Murphy is in his office. Who should I say is calling?" "Caleb Stone. Tell him it's important." The clerk disappeared into the back, and Emma felt her heart pounding so hard she was sure Caleb could hear it. He must have sensed her nervousness because he moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring. A moment later, a man emerged from the back office. He was in his 40s, with graying hair and the careful posture of someone who spent his days hunched over ledgers. But his eyes were sharp and intelligent, and when he saw Caleb, his face broke into a genuine smile. "Caleb Stone, I heard you were still haunting the mountains like some kind of ghost. What brings you to civilization?" "A problem, Tom," Caleb said, shaking the man's hand. "This is Emma Brennan. She has a homestead up in the valley below Three Sisters Peak. Cornelius Blackwood came to her place yesterday claiming her paperwork was never properly filed and that the land is available for his purchase." Thomas Murphy's expression turned grave. Blackwood again. That man is a plague on honest settlers. He turned to Emma. Miss Brennan, do you have your original receipt and any other documentation? Emma handed over her tin box with trembling fingers. Murphy took it carefully and gestured for them to follow him into his office. The room was lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with ledgers, the accumulated records of land claims throughout the territory. Murphy sat behind his desk and opened Emma's box, examining each paper with meticulous attention. His frown deepened as he read, and Emma felt her hope starting to crumble. Your documentation appears to be in order, Murphy finally said. You filed your claim in April of 1882, paid all required fees, and based on these notes, you have been continuously improving the property. By law, this land is yours. Then why did Blackwood say it was not? Emma asked, her voice shaking with relief and anger. Murphy stood and went to one of the filing cabinets, pulling out a thick folder. He flipped through it, his expression growing darker. Because someone has tampered with the official records. Your claim document is missing from our files. Emma felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. How is that possible? Blackwood has deep pockets and no scruples, Murphy said bluntly. He has done this before, bribing clerks to misfile or destroy documents. We caught one man last year, but there are always others willing to be bought. He looked at Emma with sympathy. The problem is that without the official filed claim in our records, it will be difficult to prove your ownership in court. But I have my receipt, Emma protested. You said my documentation was in order. It is, Murphy assured her, and I believe you. But Blackwood will have lawyers who will argue that a receipt does not prove the claim was officially accepted and recorded. It will come down to your word against his, and unfortunately, the law tends to favor wealth and influence. Emma felt tears burning at the back of her eyes. After everything, after coming all this way, she was still going to lose her homestead. Caleb's voice cut through her despair, calm and steady. Tom, what would it take to make Emma's claim unassailable? What would Blackwood not be able to contest? Murphy thought for a moment, then said slowly, Well, the law is quite clear on one point. A married woman's homestead claim is protected under her husband's name as well. If Miss Brennan were married, Blackwood could not claim the land without proving that both she and her husband had no legal right to it, which would be nearly impossible with the documentation she has. Emma's mind raced, trying to understand what he was suggesting. But I'm not married. No, Murphy said carefully. But if you were to marry before Blackwood files his claim, which he cannot legally do until the official waiting period is over, that gives us about a week. Your homestead would be protected. And with a husband to vouch for the continuous occupation and improvement of the land, Blackwood's case would fall apart. There was a long, heavy silence. Emma could feel Caleb standing beside her, could sense the tension in his large frame. She could not ask him, would not ask him to sacrifice his freedom and tie himself to her and her problems. But then Caleb spoke, his voice quiet but certain. Emma, would you marry me? She turned to stare at him, sure she had misheard. What? Marry me, Caleb repeated, meeting her shocked gaze steadily. Not for real, not in the way that matters. Just on paper, just to protect your land. We can annul it later, once Blackwood gives up. But I will not stand by and watch him steal what you worked so hard for. Emma's heart was racing, her thoughts a chaotic tumble. It was insane, the idea of marrying a man she had met less than 24 hours ago. But as she looked into Caleb's dark eyes, saw the sincerity and determination there, she realized something. She trusted him. More than that, she was drawn to him in a way that terrified and exhilarated her. You would do that for me, she whispered. I would do that for you, Caleb confirmed. He reached out and took her hand, his palm warm and rough with calluses. I know it is sudden, and I know you do not know me well. But I give you my word, Emma, I will protect you and your homestead. You will not lose what you built. And when this is over, when Blackwood is defeated, you will be free to live your life however you choose. Emma looked at Thomas Murphy, who was watching the exchange with interest and something that might have been approval. Would this really work? It would, Murphy confirmed. I can issue the marriage license right now, and we can have the ceremony performed by Judge Harrison this morning. Once the marriage is recorded, your homestead becomes marital property, and Blackwood would have no legal ground to stand on. Emma took a deep breath, her mind spinning. Every rational thought told her this was madness, that she should not bind herself to a stranger, even temporarily. But her heart was telling her something different. Her heart was saying that Caleb Stone was not truly a stranger, that in the short time she had known him, but he had shown her more respect and kindness than most men did in a lifetime. And more than that, the idea of being married to him, even in name only, sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with saving her homestead. "All right," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, I will marry you, Caleb Stone." Something flashed in Caleb's eyes, too quick to name, but his grip on her hand tightened. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," Emma said, and found that she meant it. Murphy sprang into action, pulling out forms and writing quickly. "I will need some basic information from both of you. Caleb, I know you were born in Pennsylvania, correct? And you are 28 years old?" As they provided the necessary details, Emma felt as if she was watching herself from outside her body. 20 minutes ago, she had been a desperate woman facing the loss of everything. Now she was about to become a married woman, bound to a mountain man who had appeared in her life like something out of a story. Murphy completed the paperwork with impressive speed, and then they were walking through Helena's streets to the courthouse, a more imposing building near the center of town. Judge Harrison turned out to be a grizzled man in his 60s who looked them over with shrewd eyes. "This seems rather sudden," he observed after Murphy explained the situation. "It is," Caleb admitted, "but my intentions are honorable, Your Honor. Miss Brennan needs protection from a man who is trying to steal her legal homestead, and I am in a position to provide that protection." Judge Harrison looked at Emma. "Young lady, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will? No one is forcing you?" "No one is forcing me," Emma said clearly. "Mr. Stone is helping me save my land. I am grateful to him, and I enter this marriage willingly." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let us proceed." The ceremony was brief and businesslike, nothing like the wedding Emma had imagined as a girl. There were no flowers, no music, no family gathered around. Just her and Caleb standing before the judge, with Thomas Murphy as their witness. But when Caleb took her hand to slide a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that Murphy had produced from somewhere, Emma felt a jolt of connection that was more powerful than any romantic fantasy. "Do you, Caleb Stone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, e'en to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Caleb said, his voice deep and sure. "And do you, Emma Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Emma looked up at Caleb, at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Stone." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Caleb bent down, and Emma rose on her toes, and their lips met in a kiss that was supposed to be perfunctory, but somehow was not. And it was soft and sweet and over too quickly, leaving Emma's heart racing and her cheeks flushed. They signed the marriage certificate, and just like that, Emma Brennan became Emma Stone. The name felt strange on her tongue, foreign and yet somehow right. Thomas Murphy shook both their hands. "Congratulations. I will make sure this is filed immediately and the copies are sent to every relevant office. Blackwood will not be able to touch your homestead now." As they left the courthouse, Emma felt dazed. The morning sun was bright, Helena was going about its business, and she was married. Married to a man she had met yesterday, a man who was now her husband in the eyes of the law. Caleb seemed to sense her confusion, because he guided her gently to a bench outside the courthouse. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I do not know," Emma admitted. "This is all happening so fast. A day ago I was alone on my homestead. Now I am married." "We can make this work," Caleb said. "I know it is not ideal, and I know you did not plan for any of this. But you will not lose your land, Emma. That is what matters." Emma looked down at the ring on her finger. It was plain but well made, the gold warm against her skin. Where did this come from? It was my mother's, Caleb said quietly. She died when I was young, and my father gave it to me before he passed. It is the only thing of value I own. Tom has been holding it for me for years, keeping it safe. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Caleb, I cannot accept this. It is too precious. You are my wife now, Caleb said, and something in the way he said it made Emma's breath catch. Even if it is temporary, even if it is just on paper, I want you to have it. My mother would have liked you. She was strong like you, determined to build a life even when things were hard. Emma turned the ring on her finger, overwhelmed by the gesture and what it meant. Thank you for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not need to repay me, Caleb said firmly. Just keep fighting for your dreams. That is payment enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Caleb said, We should head back to your homestead. Blackwood said he would return today, and I want to be there when he does. The ride back was different from the journey to Helena. They stopped to retrieve Thunder from the stable. Dia and Emma once again found herself sitting behind Caleb, her arms wrapped around his waist. But now he was her husband, and that changed everything, even as it changed nothing. She was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, of the strength of his body and the steady rhythm of his breathing. They took a more direct route back, Caleb pushing Thunder to cover the distance as quickly as possible. It was late afternoon when they finally crested the ridge above Emma's homestead, and she felt a surge of relief at seeing her cabin still standing, smoke rising from the chimney. Someone is here, Caleb said, his body tensing. They approached cautiously, and Emma saw 2 horses tied up near the cabin. Her heart sank as she recognized one of them as belonging to Blackwood. They had arrived just in time. Caleb dismounted and helped Emma down, then positioned himself slightly in front of her, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. The cabin door opened, and Cornelius Blackwood stepped out, followed by one of his men, a heavy-set brute named Maddox, who had a reputation for violence. Miss Brennan, Blackwood said, his tone dripping with false sympathy, I had hoped you would see reason and be gone by now. But I see you have returned, and you have brought one of those wild men from the mountains with you. His eyes raked over Caleb with obvious disdain. That wild man is my husband, Emma said clearly, stepping forward to stand beside Caleb, and you are trespassing on my land, Mr. Blackwood. Blackwood's expression flickered with surprise and then anger. Your husband? Do not be ridiculous. You were unmarried yesterday? A lot can happen in a day, Caleb said, his voice calm but edged with steel. Emma and I were married in Helena this morning by Judge Harrison. The marriage is legal and recorded, which means this homestead is now marital property, and your claim against it has no legal standing. Blackwood's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is preposterous. You cannot just marry someone to get around the law. Actually, we can, Emma said, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The law is quite clear on the rights of married women in their homesteads. Thomas Murphy at the land office was very helpful in explaining it to us. Murphy, Blackwood spat the name like a curse. That man has been a thorn in my side for years. Because he is honest, Caleb said, something you know nothing about. You tampered with Emma's filed claim documents, trying to make it look like she never properly established her homestead. But she has the original receipts and proof of continuous occupation. And now she has a husband who will swear to all of it in court if necessary. Maddox took a threatening step forward, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip, but Caleb did not flinch. If anything, he seemed to grow larger, more imposing, and Emma saw something dangerous flash in his dark eyes. I would not do that if I were you, Caleb said quietly. I have been living in these mountains for 8 years, surviving winters that would kill most men, hunting animals that could tear me apart. I am not afraid of you or your employer, and if you draw that gun, I will take it away from you and shove it somewhere very uncomfortable. The absolute certainty in Caleb's voice made Maddox hesitate. Blackwood grabbed his arm, pulling him back. This is not over, Blackwood snarled, glaring at Emma and Caleb. I will have lawyers go over every inch of your claim. I will find a way to prove fraud or improper filing or something that will give me grounds to contest this. You can try, Emma said, surprised by her own boldness. But my claim is legitimate, my marriage is legitimate, and you have no legal right to my land. So I suggest you leave, Mr. Blackwood, before I report you for trespassing and attempted theft. For a moment, Emma thought Blackwood might actually explode with rage. His face was purple, his hands clenched into fists, but he was smart enough to know he had been outmaneuvered. He spun on his heel and stalked toward his horse. "Watch your back, Stone," he called out as he mounted. "Men who interfere with my business tend to have unfortunate accidents." "Is that a threat?" Caleb asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Consider it a promise," Blackwood said, and then he and Maddox were riding away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Emma felt her legs go weak as the adrenaline drained from her body. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her, and guided her to the porch steps. She sat down heavily, her hands shaking. "That was terrifying," she admitted. "You did well," Caleb said, sitting beside her. The porch steps creaked under his weight. "You stood up to him and he backed down. That's not easy to do." "Only because you were here," Emma said. "I could not have done that alone." "I think you underestimate yourself," Caleb said, "but I'm glad I was here." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower toward the mountains. The crisis was over, at least for now. Emma's homestead was safe, her marriage to Caleb protecting it from Blackwood's schemes. But now she had to face a new reality. She was married, and her husband was sitting beside her, close enough to touch. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Caleb was slow to answer. "I suppose that depends on what you want. We could maintain the marriage on paper only. I could return to my camp in the high country, come down to check on you from time to time. Or I could stay here, help you with the homestead until we are certain Blackwood has given up. The choice is yours, Emma." Emma thought about it, turning the ring on her finger. The sensible thing would be to send Caleb away, to maintain the fiction of their marriage without the complication of actually living as husband and wife. But as she considered that option, she realized she did not want him to leave. The cabin would feel empty without him, and more than that, she liked having him near. He made her feel safe and challenged and alive in ways she had not felt since her father died. "Would you stay?" she asked, not looking at him. "Just for a while until we are sure Blackwood will not cause more trouble. I could use help preparing for winter, and the cabin is small, but there is room for both of us." When she finally gathered the courage to look at him, Caleb was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "I will stay," he said, "for as long as you need me." Something in his words made Emma's heart flutter, a promise of more than just temporary assistance, but she pushed the feeling aside, focusing on practical matters. "You can sleep in the loft. It is not much, but it is dry and warm, and I have some deer meat smoked, along with vegetables from the garden. We will not starve." "I can contribute," Caleb said. "I'm a good hunter, and I know these mountains. I can keep us supplied with fresh meat and fish, and I am handy with repairs if anything needs fixing." They spent the rest of the evening settling into an awkward domesticity. Caleb brought his gear in from Thunder and set up a sleeping area in the small loft above the main room. Emma cooked dinner, a simple stew made with venison and root vegetables, and they ate at her small table by lamplight. But it was strange having someone else in her space after so long alone. Emma kept expecting to feel crowded or uncomfortable, but instead, she found herself hyper-aware of Caleb's presence in a way that had nothing to do with discomfort. She noticed the way he moved carefully in the small cabin, conscious of his size. She noticed how he thanked her for every small thing, showing an appreciation that made her feel valued. And she noticed the way his eyes followed her as she moved around the cabin, a warmth in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. After dinner, Caleb insisted on cleaning up while Emma mended a tear in one of her dresses. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the pop of the fire and the occasional clink of dishes. It felt surprisingly natural, as if they had been doing this for years rather than hours. When it was time for bed, Emma changed into her nightgown behind a screen she had rigged in the corner, acutely aware that Caleb was just on the other side, separated only by a thin piece of fabric. She could hear him moving around the loft, the creak of floorboards under his weight, and had to force herself not to think about him up there, so close and yet so far away. "Good night, Emma," Caleb called down softly. "Good night, Caleb," she replied, her voice slightly breathless. Emma lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She was married to a man who was practically a stranger, sharing her cabin with him, and yet she could not bring herself to regret it. If anything, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if this was where she was supposed to be, as if Caleb was who she was supposed to be with. The days that followed fell into a pattern that felt both strange and comfortable. Caleb proved to be as capable as he had claimed, taking over many of the heavier tasks that Emma had been struggling with alone. He repaired a weak section of the cabin's roof, reinforced the door and window frames for the coming winter, and built a better shelter for Jasper the mule. He hunted regularly, keeping them supplied with fresh meat, and helped Emma harvest the last of her garden before the first frost. They worked side by side, and as they did, they talked. Emma learned about Caleb's childhood in Pennsylvania, how his father had been a blacksmith and taught him to work with his hands. She learned about his years in Wyoming, the joy of building something of his own and the devastating loss when it was taken away. She learned about his time in the mountains, the solitude and peace he had found there, but also the loneliness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. In turn, Emma shared her own stories. She told Caleb about growing up in Ohio, about her mother's death from cholera, and how it had broken something in her father. She told him about the decision to come west, the hope of starting fresh, and the harsh reality of frontier life. She told him about the first winter alone after her father died, when she had seriously considered giving up and going back east, and how she had decided to stay out of sheer stubbornness. "Your father would be proud of you," Caleb said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. You took his dream and made it real. That takes incredible strength." "Sometimes I'm not sure if it was strength or just stubbornness," Emma admitted. "There's not much difference between the two," Caleb said with a smile. "Both require you to keep going when everything tells you to quit." As the days passed, Emma found herself increasingly aware of Caleb in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude or companionship. She noticed the way his muscles flexed when he swung an axe, splitting wood for their fire. She noticed how gentle his large hands could be when he helped her with delicate tasks. She noticed the sound of his laugh, rare but warm, and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at her. And she noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. Hunger and tenderness mixed together that made her breath catch. One evening, about 2 weeks after their hasty marriage, they were cleaning up after dinner when Emma's hand brushed against Caleb's as they both reached for the same dish. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through her like lightning. She looked up and found Caleb staring at her, his dark eyes intense. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." Her heart was racing. "What is it?" Caleb set down the dish he was holding and turned to face her fully. "When I offered to marry you, I told myself it was just to help you, just to protect your homestead. And that was true at the start. But these past 2 weeks living here with you, getting to know you, I have realized something." He took a deep breath. "This is not just a marriage on paper for me anymore. My feelings for you are real, Emma, and they are growing stronger every day." Emma felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. She had been nursing similar feelings, but had been too afraid to acknowledge them, too worried about complicating an already complicated situation. "Caleb," she whispered. "I know this was supposed to be temporary," Caleb continued. "I know we agreed it was just to protect you from Blackwood. And if you still want that, if you want me to leave once we are certain the threat has passed, I will do it. But I need you to know that I do not want to leave. I want this to be real, Emma. I want to be your husband in every sense of the word, if you will have me." Emma's mind was spinning. Everything had happened so fast, but as she looked at Caleb, at this strong, kind man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most, she realized she did not need more time. She knew what she wanted. "I want that too," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I've been trying not to feel this way, trying to keep my distance, but I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and challenged and alive. When I think about you leaving, going back to the mountains, it makes my heart ache. I want you to stay, Caleb. I want this marriage to be real." The smile that spread across Caleb's face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant. He closed the distance between them in one step, his large hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Really kiss you, not like at the courthouse? Yes, Emma breathed. And then his lips were on hers. The kiss at the courthouse had been sweet, but brief. This was something else entirely. Caleb kissed her with a passion that took her breath away, his mouth moving against hers with a hunger that matched her own. Emma's arms came up to wrap around his neck, her fingers tangling in his long hair, and she pressed herself against the solid wall of his chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you standing on your porch, facing down Blackwood with fire in your eyes. Emma laughed breathlessly. I have wanted you to do that since you helped me off Thunder and Helena, and I felt how strong your hands were. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other. And Emma felt something settle into place in her chest. This was right. Caleb was right. What had started as a desperate solution had become something precious and real. That night, there was no awkward separation. They lay together in Emma's narrow bed, fully clothed but wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly until sleep claimed them. Emma had never felt safer or more content than she did in that moment, listening to the steady beat of Caleb's heart beneath her ear. The next few weeks were a revelation. Emma and Caleb stopped pretending their marriage was anything other than what it had become, a genuine partnership built on respect, attraction, and a growing love. They worked together during the day, making preparations for winter, and spent their evenings learning each other in all the ways that mattered. Caleb taught Emma how to track deer through the forest, how to read the weather in the clouds, and how to move silently through the wilderness. Emma taught Caleb about her dreams for the homestead, about her plans to expand the cabin and maybe start a small herd of cattle in the spring. They talked about everything and nothing, and the more Emma learned about her husband, the more she fell in love with him. The physical side of their relationship developed naturally. Caleb was always careful with her, mindful of his strength and her inexperience, and Emma found herself overwhelmed by his tenderness. He made her feel beautiful and desired and cherished in ways she had never imagined possible. One evening, as they lay tangled together after making love, Caleb traced lazy patterns on Emma's bare shoulder and said, I want to build you a real house, not just a cabin, but a proper house with multiple rooms and real windows. You deserve better than this. Emma propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. I love this cabin. I built it with my own hands. I know, Caleb said, his expression soft. And we will keep it, maybe use it as a storage building or a guest house. But you deserve something bigger, something comfortable. And if we are going to have a family someday, we will need the space. Emma's heart stuttered. A family. Caleb's hand moved to rest on her flat stomach, his touch gentle. Is that something you want? Children, I mean. I know we have not talked about it, but I assumed since we are married. I want that, Emma said quickly. I want everything with you, Caleb. A bigger house, children, a life together. I just did not think you wanted those things. I want them more than I can say, Caleb admitted. I thought that part of my life was over after what happened in Wyoming. But you have given me hope again, Emma. You have given me a reason to dream about the future instead of just surviving the present. They made plans late into the night, talking about the house they would build, the cattle they would raise, the children they would have. It was real now, their marriage and their life together, and Emma could not imagine being happier. Winter came to the Montana mountains with its usual ferocity, but Emma barely noticed the cold. The cabin was warm and cozy, well stocked with food and firewood thanks to Caleb's preparations. They spent long evenings by the fire, Caleb carving toys and tools from wood while Emma sewed and mended, and both of them content in each other's presence. Occasionally, Caleb would make the trek down to the settlement to trade furs and check for any news about Blackwood. Each time, he returned with the same report. The land baron was furious but had backed off, apparently realizing he had no legal recourse against Emma's claim now that she was married. Murphy says Blackwood tried to bring a case before the territorial court, Caleb told Emma one evening in late December. But the judge threw it out immediately. Your claim is ironclad, and our marriage makes it even stronger. You are safe, Emma. The homestead is yours, truly and finally. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders, one she had been carrying for so long she had almost forgotten it was there. I could not have done this without you. We did it together, Caleb corrected, on pulling her close. That is what marriage is, right? Facing challenges together, supporting each other. Christmas came, and Emma made a special dinner with a wild turkey that Caleb had shot. They exchanged small gifts. Emma gave Caleb a new shirt she had sewn from fabric she had been saving, and Caleb gave Emma a beautiful carved wooden box to replace her battered tin one. "Open it," he urged, and when Emma lifted the lid, she found a folded piece of paper inside. It was a deed, officially transferring Caleb's rights to a plot of land adjacent to Emma's homestead. "I filed a claim on the property next to yours," Caleb explained. 320 acres total now, Emma, enough to really build something. I wanted to wait to give it to you until the deed came through. It is my Christmas gift to you. "Fee to our future." Emma threw her arms around him, overwhelmed with emotion. "This is too much. How did you afford the filing fees?" "I have been saving my fur money for years," Caleb said. "I had nothing to spend it on, living alone in the mountains. But now I have you, and I want to invest in our future. We can run cattle on that land, Emma. We can build the house we talked about. We can make your father's dream real." That night, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Emma and Caleb made love with a tenderness and passion that brought tears to Emma's eyes. This was what happiness felt like, she realized, not just the absence of fear or struggle, but the presence of love and hope and partnership. Spring came eventually, as it always did, melting the snow and turning the mountains green. Emma and Caleb began work on their new house, a proper 2-story structure with real glass windows that Caleb ordered from Helena. They worked side by side, hauling logs and hammering nails, and the house slowly took shape. Other settlers started to notice their success, and word spread about the couple in the mountains who had stood up to Cornelius Blackwood and won. A few other small landholders approached Caleb for advice, and he found himself becoming an advocate for homesteaders' rights, using his knowledge of the law and his friendship with Thomas Murphy to help others protect their claims. By midsummer, the house was finished, a beautiful structure that seemed to grow organically from the landscape around it. Emma stood on the wide front porch, looking out over their land, and felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that brought tears to her eyes. "What do you think?" Caleb asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think it is perfect," Emma said, leaning back against his solid chest. "I think we did something remarkable here, Caleb. Not just building a house, but building a life." "Our life," Caleb agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And it is just beginning, Emma. We have so much ahead of us." He was right. That fall, Emma discovered she was pregnant, a revelation that filled both of them with joy and a little bit of terror. Caleb became even more protective, if that was possible, hovering over Emma and insisting she rest more. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Emma protested one evening when Caleb tried to stop her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I know," Caleb said, looking sheepish. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe. I want to take care of you." Emma's expression softened. "You do take care of me. Every single day, but I'm still capable of doing things, Caleb. I need you to trust that I know my own limits." They found a balance, as they had with everything else in their marriage. Caleb learned to step back and let Emma be independent while still being there when she needed help. And Emma learned to accept that Caleb's protectiveness came from a place of love, not a desire to control her. Their son was born in late spring of 1885, a healthy baby boy with Caleb's dark hair and Emma's green eyes. They named him William, after Emma's father, and Caleb cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered to Emma as she rested, exhausted but happy. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a family. I never thought I would have this again." "We gave it to each other," Emma corrected gently. "That is what we do, Caleb. We build our life together." The years that followed were not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that wandered off and crops that failed. Cornelius Blackwood made one more attempt to cause trouble, trying to dam a stream that fed Emma and Caleb's property. But Caleb took him to court and won, establishing clear water rights that protected not just their land, but the lands of several other small homesteaders. After that defeat, Blackwood seemed to give up on his vendetta. He focused his efforts elsewhere, and Emma and Caleb were left in peace to build their ranch and raise their growing family. William was joined by a daughter, Sarah, 2 years later, and then another son, Michael, 2 years after that. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Caleb's knowledge of the land and Emma's business sense proved to be an unbeatable combination. They hired help as needed, always treating their workers with respect and fairness, and their reputation spread. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb took Emma up to a ridge above their property, the same ridge where he had first spotted Blackwood's men threatening her all those years ago. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked, holding her hand as they looked out over the land they had built together. "How could I forget?" Emma said with a smile. "You rode out of the mountains like some kind of wild man, offering to help a stranger." "You were never a stranger," Caleb said seriously. "From the moment I saw you standing up to Blackwood, I felt like I knew you, like I was meant to find you that day." Emma leaned against his shoulder, comfortable with the easy intimacy of a decade together. "I used to wonder what would have happened if you had not come along, if I had faced Blackwood alone." "You would have found a way," Caleb said with certainty. "You are the strongest person I know, Emma. You always have been. I just gave you a tool to use against him." "You gave me so much more than that," Emma said. "You gave me love and partnership in a family. You gave me everything I did not even know I wanted." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the same colors that had filled the sky on that first desperate ride to Helena. So much had changed since then, but the core of what they had remained the same: love, respect, and an unshakable commitment to each other and the life they were building. Down below, they could see their children playing in the yard, watched over by one of the ranch hands. William was 8 now, already showing signs of inheriting his father's size and strength. Sarah was 6, clever and quick with her mother's determination. Michael was 4, all energy and laughter. "We did good," Caleb said quietly. "We did very good," Emma agreed. Years continued to pass, each one adding to the richness of their life together. Emma and Caleb watched their children grow, taught them about the land and the importance of hard work and integrity. They saw their ranch expand, their herd increase, their reputation grow. Other homesteaders came to them for advice and support, and Caleb became known as a champion of small landholders' rights, someone who would stand up to the big ranchers and fight for fairness. Thomas Murphy became a frequent visitor, often staying for weeks at a time. He and Caleb worked together to document fraudulent land claims and help legitimate homesteaders protect their rights. It was satisfying work, using the law as a tool for justice rather than oppression. Cornelius Blackwood died in 1895, and to everyone's surprise, his will revealed that he had been impressed by Emma and Caleb's stand against him. He left them a parcel of land adjacent to their ranch, along with a letter apologizing for his actions and expressing admiration for their determination. It was a strange sort of redemption, but Emma and Caleb accepted it in the spirit it was offered, using the additional land to expand their cattle operation. Their children grew and eventually started families of their own. William married a schoolteacher from Helena and took over management of the ranch. Sarah became a lawyer, inspired by her father's advocacy work, and fought for land rights across the territory. Michael joined the territorial rangers, protecting the wilderness his father loved so much. Emma and Caleb grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by years of shared experiences and unwavering support. On a warm summer evening in 1910, Emma and Caleb sat on the porch of their house, the same house they had built together so many years ago. They were in their 60s now, grandparents many times over, and the ranch sprawled around them, a testament to everything they had built. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked, her hand finding Caleb's as naturally as breathing. "Marrying me so quickly, tying yourself to my problems?" Caleb squeezed her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "Not for one single second. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, Emma Stone. You gave me back my life, gave me a reason to rejoin the world. Every moment we have had together, every challenge we have faced, every joy we have celebrated, it has all been worth it. Even when the cattle got loose that year and we spent 3 weeks rounding them up, Emma teased. Even then, Caleb said with a laugh, although I could have done without the part where that bull nearly trampled me. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains, just as they had done thousands of times before. The land around them was thriving, green and fertile, home to their children and grandchildren. It was everything Emma's father had dreamed of and more, a legacy built on love and determination and the courage to stand up for what was right. I love you, Emma said softly. I have loved you since that first desperate ride to Helena. When you held me on thunder and promised we would save my homestead, I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Caleb replied, bringing her hand to his lips. You are my heart, Emma, my home, my everything. Whatever time we have left, whether it is days or decades, I want to spend every moment with you. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, Emma and Caleb remained on their porch, holding hands and watching the land they had built together. Their story had started with a desperate gambit, a hasty marriage born of necessity. But it had become something far greater. A love story that had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and created a legacy that would last for generations. The mountain man who had ridden out of the wilderness to help a desperate woman had found his purpose. The homesteader who had refused to give up her land had found her partner. Together, they had built not just a ranch, but a life, rich with love and meaning and the kind of happiness that came from facing the world side by side. And as the years continued to unfold, as their great-grandchildren played in the fields they had cleared and lived in the house they had built, Emma and Caleb's story became the stuff of family legend. The tale of how a land baron had tried to steal a homestead, how a mountain man had filed the papers and married her fast, and how that desperate beginning had blossomed into one of the greatest love stories the Montana Territory had ever known. They lived to see Montana become a state in 1889. Lived to see the wild frontier they had known transform into settled communities and modern towns. But their land remained, a piece of wilderness preserved and protected, a reminder of what could be built when two people stood together against impossible odds. When Caleb finally passed in 1912, peacefully in his sleep with Emma beside him, he was surrounded by family, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them beneficiaries of the life he and Emma had built. Emma grieved him deeply, but found comfort in knowing that their love had created something that would endure long after they were both gone. Emma lived for 3 more years, spending her final days on the porch of the house she and Caleb had built, telling stories to her grandchildren about the early days, about standing up to Cornelius Blackwood, about the mountain man who had appeared when she needed him most. She spoke of Caleb with such love and warmth that even those who had never met him felt they knew him, understood the kind of man he had been. When Emma passed in 1915, the family buried her next to Caleb on a hill overlooking their ranch, under a sky so big and blue it seemed to go on forever. The headstone was simple but meaningful. Emma and Caleb Stone, partners in life and love, builders of dreams. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations, each one adding their own mark but always honoring the legacy of the couple who had started it all. And every new generation learned the story of how a land baron had tried to claim a homestead, how a mountain man had filed the papers and married her fast, and how that pragmatic beginning had transformed into a love that stood the test of time. It was a story of courage and determination, of standing up for what was right even when the odds seemed impossible. But most of all, it was a story of love. The kind of love that appears when you least expect it, the kind of love that transforms 2 lonely people into an unbreakable partnership, the kind of love that builds not just a home, but a legacy that endures for generations. And in the end, that was Emma and Caleb's greatest achievement. Not the ranch they built or the land they protected or the battles they won, but the love they shared and the family they created. It was a love forged in desperation, but refined through years of partnership and devotion. And it was a love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that sometimes a stranger who appears when you need them most is actually the person you were always meant to find. Their story became part of the landscape itself, woven into the mountains and valleys of Montana, a reminder that true love is not just about romance or passion, though Emma and Caleb had plenty of both. True love is about standing together, fighting together, building together, and creating something that will outlast your own lifetime. The homestead that Emma had fought so hard to protect became the foundation for a ranching empire that lasted well into the modern era. The house that Emma and Caleb built still stood decades later, lovingly maintained by their descendants, are a testament to the skill and care with which it had been constructed. And the land itself, those original 320 acres that represented Emma's dreams and Caleb's investment in their future, remained in the family, protected and cherished, a tangible connection to the couple who had started it all. Visitors to the ranch, even a century later, could feel the presence of Emma and Caleb in the sturdy construction of the buildings, in the careful layout of the property, in the stories that were still told around dinner tables and campfires. They could see Emma's determination in the way the ranch had been positioned to take advantage of natural resources, and Caleb's wilderness wisdom in the way the land had been preserved and protected. But most of all, they could feel the love that had infused every decision, every building, every choice that Emma and Caleb had made. It was a love that had transformed a desperate gambit into a genuine partnership, that had turned a marriage of convenience into a romance for the ages, that had proven that sometimes the most practical decisions lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And so, the story of Emma and Caleb Stone lived on, passed from generation to generation, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, that courage and determination can overcome any obstacle, and that when two people stand together, they can build something that will last forever. It was a story of the Wild West, of homesteaders and land barons, of mountain men and desperate gambits. But more than anything, it was a story of love, fierce, loyal, enduring love that conquered all challenges and created a legacy that would never be forgotten.